Hello and welcome to episode 153 of my podcast all about knitting and crochet and my yarn shop here in Wiesbaden, Germany. I'm Kiko and today is August 15th, 2022. Today I'm wearing two fairly old things and the shawl is so old it hasn't made it into Ravelry, so there's no project page because back then I wasn't using Ravelry very regularly. And even though I've thought about creating project pages for my old projects, I haven't found the time to do so yet. This shawl is knit out of opal sock yarn with cotton. So this is part cotton, part wool and part nylon. I loved the color the first moment I saw it. I just realized it's really close in color to one of my projects. And the pattern is called Genie, and it's one of the first patterns that I ever knit off Knitty.com. So Knitty is an online knitting magazine where all the patterns are free, and they have lots and lots of beautiful and sometimes crazy patterns. And I was really very happy when I learned about that and found out about all the beautiful patterns that they have. And the thing that intrigued me about this shawl was the many drop stitches on the one hand, which makes it airy and open and light, but also, or especially, the fact that it has cables that look pretty on both sides. And they actually don't only look pretty on both sides, but I think they actually look the same on both sides, which when I first saw it and read about it, I thought that's not possible. I thought cable patterns always had to have a front and a back side, but this is knit in a way that it looks the same on both sides. And it's a free pattern, so I can tell you how to do that. What you do is you knit one through the back loop, you purl one normal, knit one normal, and then you purl one through the back loop. And in between, you do that twice for every cable. And then in between the cables, you create new stitches by doing yarn overs, and then you drop them again. And that's how you get this open work or this open knitted fabric. And some of the drop stitches go all the way along the shawl, so you only drop them right before the end. And other drop stitches you drop earlier, and then you always create this bit of open space. So while you're knitting this, it looks a lot smaller, and then once the stitches are dropped, it grows. And while I was knitting on it, I wasn't sure how wide this was going to be, so I wasn't sure how long to knit it. So at one point, I dropped all the stitches that had to be dropped, and I blocked the piece I'd already knit. So I could measure the width, and then I could think about how long I wanted the shawl to be. So that was quite a nifty thing to do. And then I created yarn overs in the places where I had dropped the stitch, and then I knew how long to make the shawl. And I knit on it a long time. All those purl through the back loops, they really took a long time to do. And then also the cable crossings. So I'm not sure how long it took me to do this, but I remember that when I was about a third done, I think, I sort of lost steam. But then we went on a trip to Japan in 2010, and I brought this as one of the projects. So I knitted on it during both flights and also a lot of the time that I was there. So I had nothing else to do. I wasn't distracted. So that's when I got enough done to actually finish it then. And the interesting thing is that I also took this project along. I'll talk about that in a minute. Yeah, so I think I knit three 100 grams balls of this yarn into this shawl. You have a cable running down the beginning and the end of the shawl, which I really like. You have a cable running up and down both sides. So there's just lots and lots of cables and holes in the middle, or strands of yarn in the middle. I love this shawl. So this is the Genie shawl from Knitty.com. And this project, when we went, I read in the notes on, this has a Ravelry page. On that page, I write that I started crocheting this top on that trip to Japan, and I did the first few motifs on that trip. And then 2 years later, we went on another holiday and I continued knitting on this, but I never put a beginning or end date for the project. So I don't know when I actually finished it, especially as it's not officially finished. I did put the project on finish at some point because I decided this was just going to be a top. In the original pattern, this is supposed to be a dress. So I should have added 2 more rows of squares to it, and then it would have been a nice dress. And I think the pattern has some sort of sleeve. Not sure anymore. I probably have the pattern somewhere, but I don't know. So this is basically you crochet squares, and then in the last round you crochet them together, and it gives this nice open work top with these flowers in the middle of every square. And then right here where the neckline is there, there's 1 square missing, but also this square here is only a 3/4 square. So you do the flower in the middle, but then I crochet back and forth, and this 4th part of the square is left out, and this gives this nice V neckline. Very lightweight, pure cotton top, and I'm very happy with it, but I still think about adding those more squares so it becomes a dress. Maybe I'll do that at some point, I don't know. But before I sit down, I promised to show the cardigan that I knit on me, and it's too warm to wear it all the time during filming, but I have washed it and not blocked it, just put it down to dry, and I want to show you what it looks like on me before I wear it as what I'm wearing in a later episode when the weather turns colder again. So this is what it looks like on me. I'm really, really happy. It's just an open cardigan. I will stand on my chair so you can see how long it is. It's fairly long. I think it's perfect. So this is the back, that's straight, and then you get this nice curve down the fronts. And I did choose a smaller size for the neckline to make sure it stays close to my neck and it sits on the shoulders really nicely. It doesn't, even if I move, it doesn't fall off. And I'm also very happy that I knit long sleeves. I think the length's just about perfect, which rarely happens. and I'm also very, very happy with this bit of color that I put at the end of the sleeves, and I think it just complements the collar so nicely, and just adds this little bit of color. I can wear it open. It just sits very nicely. I could put a little needle like here to keep it closed when it gets colder. I could even put a needle like up here, and then it would stay more closed. So I'm sure I'm going to experiment with that a lot once it gets colder, and as I said, I will probably wear this cardigan all the time then. So that's what I'm wearing. I'm also wearing this today. You may have noticed and wondered about that. These were the sort of entrance tickets to the yarn festival in Düsseldorf, which happened last weekend, and I was there for both days, which is why I have 2 of those. And I am going to mention the yarn festival a few times this video, so I thought it'd be fun to keep wearing them. Okay, I will put it on. Not promising to keep it on, but we'll see. Yeah, so that's all I'm wearing. Then on to finished objects. And I have 2 finished objects, and I will have to stand up again. The first finished object is the bigger one and the older one. And it's this one. It's my Vortex shawl. Finally finished knitting. I only had to weave in 2 ends because it was this huge 200-gram yarn cake, and I washed it and I blocked it. And it was almost dry by the time I finished putting the pins in, but I didn't have to put that many pins because I used blocking wires, and I put the wires through those points. While I was knitting, it was hardly visible. You could hardly see that I was creating these points, but in blocking, I just made sure I always put the wire through one of those points, and then I just needed a few pins to actually pin the thing down. And it's huge. The diameter of the shawl is about as high or as big as I am tall. So this really, really is a huge but very light shawl. So I knit 150 grams into the shawl. I have 50 grams left. I have beads in almost every edge stitch of the knitted on lace. The only bit that doesn't have beads is the very beginning, because I started knitting the edge while I was on holiday and I didn't bring any beads. I hadn't thought about that before. So I started without, and once I got home, I started putting in the beads. And at first I thought I might sew the beads on where they are missing, but it's so difficult to find this little bit that doesn't have beads that I won't bother. So there are 1, 2, 3.5 pattern repeats that have no beads. And this is just such a tiny part that nobody is ever going to notice unless I point it out. So all the rest has the beads in it. And it's big and it's beautiful and it's lightweight and it's cotton and it's pink. And I'm really, really very happy. And some of the people who were in Düsseldorf already saw the shawl, and some people saw me wearing it because there was air condition in the big hall, and with air conditioning it sometimes gets too cold for me, so I need to put on a lightweight shawl. I love the way the beads sparkle when I hold the shawl like this, and I'm really happy I put them in, even though it was a lot of work. Finished object after 9 years. I cast this on 9 years ago. I started the knitted on edge 7 years ago, and now it's finally done. Okay, the other finished project, as promised, are the socks for my nephew. I have not woven in all the ends. I wove in some of them, just didn't have the time, but we are going to celebrate his birthday on the weekend, so until then I have enough time to weave in all the ends, and then he can get them and put them on, and probably won't keep them on because it's too warm, but as soon as the weather changes he can put them on. And there's one more thing I wanted to show you. I usually use these sock blockers to show you the socks, and they are by Daniela's Wolltopf, who's a German yarn dyer who also makes these beautiful sock blockers, and she usually has a certain motif for a certain size. So whenever you get the size 42, 43, it usually has this motif on it. And when I first got the bigger sock blockers, I only got one because a friend of mine ordered them for me, and I hadn't specified that I want 2 of both of each size. She only got 1 of each size, which was good to show like the first sock or just one on the blocker. But I had wanted another one in those 2 sizes for quite some time, but I kept forgetting ordering them or doing something about it. But I talked about it to some people, and I think I have mentioned that it was my shop's 5th birthday a few months ago, and one of my very nice customers and friends remembered that I wanted other sock blockers or a second sock blocker in those 2 sizes, and she not only ordered them for me and gave them to me as a present, but she also wrote to the designer and asked if she was willing to put a different motif on the sock blockers that she wanted to give to me. And the designer wrote back that she usually doesn't do that, but she made an exception for me, and this is what she put on the sock blocker. And I think this is so lovely and so nice. And did I bring the other one? Yes, I did. So this was the one size, And the other size is the 40-41. This is what she usually puts on them. And this is what she put on for me. So I think it was so lovely, both from my customer who ordered them for me and also from Daniela, who creates these, to give me sock blockers with gnomes on it. And I met her last weekend in Düsseldorf and I asked her if it was okay to show them on the video. And she said it was okay. So that's how I am showing them to you right now. Words. Yeah, so those are my finished objects. As I said, I will be knitting more film reel socks in the future for all the members of my sister's family, but I am waiting for a certain series of opal that will get here, I think, next month. So that's when I can pick up that pattern again. Until then, I will have to knit other socks. Yeah, on to works in progress, a pair of socks. I did not put a lot of work into my Catharine Macaulay socks, the pattern battle socks. This is the colorway that we are all knitting in this pattern battle, and I added 1 or 2 pattern repeats in length. I still haven't made up my mind how high I want to knit them, so I just added a bit. I will probably not make them knee high because of the pattern. I might add another pattern repeat and then just do the ribbing, and then I'll have nice socks, and I'll knit another pair of knee-high socks when I knit another pattern out of the book, because most of the patterns, I think all the patterns except for this one, are knee-high socks. So I thought instead of trying to change this pattern to put in increases somehow, I'll just knit one of the other patterns where all the work has been done for me, so I don't have to calculate things. I can just follow the pattern, have nice knee-high socks. So these will just get a bit more of leg and then a ribbing. Yeah, that's the socks. No more socks on the needles right now. I really do have to cast on some. But I have a new project that I'm knitting on double pointed needles. So it's almost like a sock, but it's not a sock. So what is it? It's certainly a gnome. I'm knitting my August gnome. And I chose the following colors by Wolldackel. This is my color 1. This is white with some neon pastel colors. Then my color 2 is this white with some blue and turquoise colors. Oh, that's hanging on the gnome. And this is number 3, which is a beautiful light blue with a few speckles. And my color 4 is not by Wolldackel, but that's an opal yarn. But it was a special yarn, a special edition where they dyed wool with silk and nylon. It was just like a one-off thing that they did for a certain customer, but we were able to order some. So I ordered all the colors. Weren't too many colors back then, maybe 6 or 8. So I have a few leftover colors from either using them or some few colors that I haven't sold. Yeah, and I thought they look really nicely together. And I am knitting the Nice to Know You pattern, which is, I think, so far the only gnome that's designed to have the yarn held double. And the first one I knit from that pattern had pink and green colors, and I gave it away. A friend of mine really wanted to have it, so I gave it to him, and I decided to knit the pattern again. So I have one version with me, and this time I wanted to choose colors that weren't quite as contrasty as the last one, where I didn't know what was going to happen. And I ended up choosing colors that are so alike that you can hardly tell the difference. So this is what I've knit so far. This is the front. And hang on. Okay, so this bit of the hat is color 1 and 2. And then you can see a slight change here. There's no more pink. This is color 2 and 3. And then you go to color 1 and 3. And there's really very little difference. There's a little bit more blue here than here. And you can tell the pink is missing here and it comes back here. And this is the bit that needs to be sewn down later on. According to the pattern, I should have already done it, but I was knitting on that in Düsseldorf and I was too busy to sit down and sew something. And actually, after I had picked up the stitches for the body, that's when I got to meet Sierra Shawl, the designer of all the gnomes herself. So she had announced that she was going to be there in Düsseldorf and that there would be a meet and greet with her at the booth of Das Mondschaf, who's a German hand dyer. And so we sat in a little group with gnome knitters and the queen of gnomes herself. And I was knitting on the body of this gnome. And I got to the point where you have to purl a few stitches for the pocket that I'm going to knit later. And I was knitting and counting stitches, and I realized something was off. So I took a moment to look at it, and I realized I was 12 stitches off. So I said, oh, I'm missing stitches. And then Sarah said, oh, just fudge it. And then we had to discuss how to translate fudge it into German. And while they were doing that, I looked at the pattern again, I concentrated a bit, and I realized I was so distracted by talking in the group and meeting Sierra Shawl that I'd only done the increases at the beginning and end of the round instead of beginning and end of each needle. So that explained why I had way too few stitches. But then I fudged it. I just added 3 rounds with lots and lots of increases in there, so I had the right amount of stitches on each needle, and then I could put the purl stitches. And now I can continue knitting. And this is a color 2 and 4, and then the bottom will be color 3 and 4. Yeah, and then there'll be the little pocket and the arms and the beard. And for the beard in the pattern, you use the color 1 held double, but I'm not quite sure whether this is going to be enough. It's probably going to be enough, but it's this kind of ball where you don't see both ends. So I would have to wind it in a different way if I wanted to use both ends, and I decided I will use 1 strand of this color and 1 white strand, so the beard is going to be a bit whiter, more white than just the color 1, and I think this should look nice. Yeah, so this is my August gnome. Some people yesterday asked me if I was going to show this off as a finished object today, and I said no way. I already have 2 finished objects, and I didn't want to knit the whole night on this. Yeah, actually I was knitting on the film reel socks on both the way to Düsseldorf and on the way back. I was really happy and grateful that my friend offered to drive so I could sit and knit and finish the socks. So that was very kind of her. Yeah, so first new project for today, and last small project out of sock yarn. As to the big projects, the garments I'm knitting, there's 1 out of sock yarn and 2 that are not sock yarn. I put in some knitting in my gnome pullover. There was a time when I thought I might finish this and wear this in Düsseldorf, but then I realized I would have had to neglect all the other project if I wanted to finish this, and also it was quite clear that it would be way too warm to wear this in August. So yeah, I didn't stress myself out. I put in some knitting whenever I was talking to people and didn't want to concentrate on the knitting. I could just pick this up and do some knit stitches. So I'm getting to the point where I have to measure how long I want the pullover to be. I'm fairly small, so pullovers always look ridiculously small when I start the yoke, but once it's done, it actually fits my body. So if I wanted a fairly short pullover, I probably have to end soon. Unless I want it to be a long pullover and then I have to knit probably the same amount again. I haven't made up my mind. I'll let you know when I know. So the next garment I'm showing you is and I looked that word up. I found that for the German word Pullunder, it gave me either tank top or slipover. And tank top for me is something very light, made of cotton. I may be wrong, but I thought slipover might be a nice word for a pullover without sleeves. So that's what I'm going to call this. So I'm knitting a slipover for a theatre to be used as a costume, part of the costume. And I finished the back. of that slip over. So this is this yarn by Rico, which changes color by itself. So I'm getting those colorful stripes without putting any work in, except for one spot where I had a knot in the yarn, and I undid the knot. I'm going to weave in the ends later. I never leave knots in the yarn. And yeah, so last week I was just about to start the armhole, and now I finished the back. So next week I will hopefully have cast on the front, and then I can show you the other colorway that I got for this slip over. Yeah, so that was quite nice to be able to finish the first part. And then the third garment I'm knitting on is my second new cast on. And that's a yarn that I bought a few weeks ago when I was on a short trip over the weekend with my husband. And we went wherever I go, I always have to look at yarn shops. So we went into that yarn shop and I found this yarn by Lang Yarns called Linello. And it's 40% linen, 32% cotton, and 28% viscose. So it's a really nice summery mix. And I haven't knit with linen a lot before, and I think the only thing I can think of that I've knit with the linen yarn I've given to my sister. So I don't think I have anything knit out of linen. And I've always wanted to have something. I have a pure linen yarn at home that I haven't used yet, except for a gauge swatch. I should pick that up soon. But this is the yarn that I bought, and I love the colors as well as the material. And I decided to knit the top Lechfall by Nicolor. So she's a German designer who's specialized in designs where you can just start knitting. You don't have to do a gauge swatch. You can use any yarn, any needle, and you can just start knitting. And with this top, I started knitting at this point. You start with 6 stitches, and then you knit some increases, you knit back and forth. And once you reach a certain size, you cast on more stitches, and then you close it to knit in the round. And this is what I've done so far. This bit is the front, the patterned parts are the sleeves, and this is going to be the back. And I knit on that on the Saturday when I was in Düsseldorf, and I knit, I think, maybe 3 or 5 rounds. And then I realized when I looked at it again, I realized that I had messed up the increase line. So this is not a usual raglan pullover, but the increases are organized differently. And what happens at this line and this line is that you increase every row. So in the beginning it's every row, and then later it's every round, and then the front is constructed differently. But by increasing every round, you get this straight line that looks like 1 stitch, which is actually, I think, 2 half stitches. But anyway, it's supposed to be a straight line. And when I looked at my knitting, I noticed that at one point it sort of veered to the side a bit, and it looked funny. And then usually when I make a mistake, I drop the stitches and I pick them up again in the correct order, and then that's it. But because there are so many increases, I was not able to do that. I dropped the stitches and I just couldn't get it organized. I just did not know where the different strands of yarn belonged. So I actually sat down and I knitted backwards. And also because of the increases and because I'd only cast on the stitches, I didn't want to pull the needle out, which is something I tend to do if I have to go back several rows. I usually just pull out the needle, rip it out, pick up the stitches again. Didn't dare to do that, so I knit backwards for 3 rounds, I think. And then I was at the spot where I could fix it, and then I had to do the same work again. But I got past the point where I had dropped the stitches, and I've had some color changes already, and I'm waiting for the pink. I have 2 balls of yarn. They are 100 grams, They run 280 meters. I'm pretty sure this should be enough for a short sleeve top for me. And what I'm going to do is I will knit until I can separate the stitches for the sleeves. And I think at that point I will continue knitting a little bit, but then I will use the second ball of yarn to do the neckline and the sleeves. And then once I finish everything on the top of the top, I can use the rest of the yarn just to knit down as far as I can go. So I hope to use up all the yarn that I have. Yeah, so new cast on, summer top with linen. Now, I did not knit on the high Sierra Shawl, no time for that, but I added a few rows to the Talavera blanket, and I finished the fourth part of the pattern, and I've already received the magazine with the fifth part, so I can just keep crocheting. The fifth part I think is again 12 rounds, so I thought if I do 3 rounds every week, it takes me about a month to finish it, and I get a new magazine every month, so that should be fine. Yeah, this last few rows weren't too exciting. There's some back post crocheting, but otherwise not a lot of pattern. The darker blue has these cross stitches. I think I already started that, had started that last week. I'm not sure I've ever shown you the wrong side of the blanket. Just wanted to quickly show you. Some of the patterning is not visible, like those bobbles. Other bits are visible, but I wanted to show you. I've woven in all the ends as I went. I'm really happy about that because I think weaving in a million ends at the end of the project is really frustrating. So I'm really trying to be very, is it conscientious? Not sure. I try to weave in my ends every time I change the color. So that's, I think, a good idea. The other blanket, of course, is my dinosaur blanket. I think I added in exactly 10 rows, the way I had planned at some point. And I promised I was going to stand up again. So I added quite a bit to the upper jaw. I crochet the third stroke of the wah scream. And I think I finished the eye. It looks a bit funny, but I think that's the way it's supposed to look. This plant thingy has grown, but it hasn't separated into the separate leaves yet. This will probably happen very soon. And then, yeah, fairly soon I will have a completed Tyrannosaurus Rex dinosaur in a crochet blanket. And it's too big to fit into the frame. Yep, so still enjoying this project tons. So as soon as this is finished, I will have to look for a new pattern crocheted in this technique. Maybe it's going to be something small like a dishcloth, because I really like the dishcloth that I already crocheted in this technique, but I didn't really put a pattern in because I got the pattern wrong because it was my first time using this technique. So I just freestyled something, which is fun, but I would like to have one with a proper pattern as well. Yeah, and that brings me to the last project because I still didn't cast on the baby socks. I'm still planning to do so. I will use different needles than originally planned because I bought new needles last weekend in Düsseldorf, and I'll show you the needles when I knit with them, and the same for all the yarn that I bought. Of course, I bought quite a bit of yarn. I also bought a book, and I bought some needle cables for my Chalgu needles. I'll show you all those things when I use them. I think that makes more sense than presenting everything and then you forget about it. But when I'm using them, then it makes sense that I bought them. Yeah, so the last project is the square that I'm crocheting for the Viva Vittoria happening that's going to happen next year in March in Dortmund. not Dortmund, it was Darmstadt, in Darmstadt. Yeah, so I'm using the Opal Rainforest color, and I'm crocheting the Kaboom square by Shelley Husband out of her book Granny Square Patchwork. So far this is still a circle, and it's continuing to be a circle for several more rounds, and then I'm going to get to square it off. And yeah, really enjoy crocheting this. It was great. It wasn't really fun to crochet this line here, this like a second layer, but I love the look. So it was worth the work. Yeah, so this is, by the way, this is the yarn where I thought it has this turquoise with yellow. So it's really close in color to my shawl. And of course, if you come up with so many colorways every year, you're bound to repeat things every now and then. And because this is cotton, this has cotton in it, it's a bit lighter anyway. And I don't think it's exactly the same. It just uses the same colors and probably placed differently. But it's hard to compare with a crocheted circle and a knitted rectangle. But yeah, you can tell I like these colors. Yeah, so that's everything I knit and crocheted last week. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!